Welcome to another edition of the Dakotan's Election Central, where we are covering comprehensively the 2024 election cycle for North Dakota. Today, I am joined by one of the candidates in District 44 Senate, Jose Castaneda. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully, I got your last name right.
You did. Thank you.
Boom, we're off to a great start.
Yes, we are.
So, before we jump into the world of politics, which is going to be an intense discussion, things are happening in District 40. It's getting intense there. Let's talk about you. What's your background? How I know that you legally migrated to the U.S. Tell us your story.
Well, when I was seven and a half, if you want to be exact, family moved to Tucson, Arizona in 1985, November of 1985. Prior to that, my family had moved to Burbank, California, a few years earlier, truly looking for the American dream. Mm-hmm. At that time, only my dad had a work visa. My mom did not, and so, she had a visa coming to the United States, but not to work. And looking for work, and although my dad's an electrical engineer, my mom a teacher, they did not have all the credentials in the U.S., went to California, just started going through their savings, wasn't working out, had to go back to Mexico.
Wow.
Tried again a second time once they, kind of learned from that, figured some stuff out, and was able to get a job in the United States. Be longer story for, anytime anyone wants to stop me anywhere and ask me, it's a great story, but we'll speed it up. So we were able to finally come to the United States with everything we needed to succeed in 1985. So both times were legally, but the first time we didn't quite have our ducks in a row to be successful.
Right.
And from there on, my dad essentially put himself back to school. My mom, she got a master's. My dad got a master's, PhD, after redoing essentially his EIT and PE for people that know about that. I just remember him sitting at the table, after dinner. He'd pull out his books and go to town. Just put himself back to just give us a better life.
Why was education so important?
It was a big deal for him and for my parents too, because they know that a good solid education can get you can help you get places.
Right.
And we talk a little about education down the road, down this interview if you want to. It's one of my 6 tenets that you can find on my website, is that they wanted us to succeed. And so he was already an electrical engineer, been practicing for 20 some odd years in Mexico City. So, he was going to continue to do that, but he needed to, pass all the tests. You're usually fresh out of college, you know how to do it, but you haven't been in college for 20 years, so you had to go through and knock it out again.
Right.
So grew up in Tucson and went to a high school called University High School in Tucson, kind of like a public magnet school. So great opportunities there. Like 95% of graduates from that school end up going to college. So it's a solid school. I was very, very lucky to have the opportunity just where you live, because if you don't live in Tucson, right, you don't get that opportunity.
Right, absolutely.
Great job there, and something I'd like to see, more in North Dakota. That model, it works. I think it worked great, and I had the work hard. Had the opportunity to go to the United States Air Force Academy. Graduated there in 2000, and then went on to pilot training, and started off at Shepherd Air Force Base as an instructor pilot. Then moved on to be a B-52 pilot and came to Minot Air Force Base and got here in 2008. Had a small stint from 14 to 16 at the Pentagon.
Wow.
I learned a lot.
Right.
Tons. I was already been a fan of politics since I was very young. Growing up, listening to Rush Limbaugh.
Really?
Brought up to that, helped a lot of campaigns in high school.
Okay.
Young Republicans.
Where did that interest come from? I mean, you migrated over. It's an interesting background.
It's this country is truly, in my opinion, the land of opportunity. Mm-hmm. When we first came to the U.S., I don't know if anyone remembers, 1985, there was a movie, Fievel Comes to America, I want to say is the name of the movie.
Okay.
And as you say, they would say the streets were paved with gold, right? Because it was a bunch of little mice, and it was just a caricature for immigrants. Said,
Yeah.
oh, the streets in the U.S. and America are paved with cheese, right?
Right.
But it was interesting that movie came out. I went to see it at the movie theaters back when they were $1 to go to the movies, and that really kind of struck a chord because this truly is a land of opportunity. But that doesn't mean that you got to work your butt off to be able to get there.
Right.
But there are so many other countries coming from Mexico. And like I said, I could tell you story after story my parents went through. You could work your butt off and not move one echelon forward.
Yeah.
This country is about opportunity. And that's one of my biggest things. We need to continue to have the opportunity available for anyone who reaches out and wants to get it. And that is why I really believe in being a part of the political system, because so many other countries you don't get to do that, and here you do.
Right. So I assume the Air Force brought you to North Dakota, but what kept you here?
Getting here, I was able to really feel like the values that I've always, really espoused as American values,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to really see them in North Dakota.
Wow.
In Minot. And I really, really liked them.
Yeah.
So when, got orders to go to the Pentagon, right? In the military, you move. And then at the Pentagon, got a call saying, hey, there's an opportunity for you to move back. And, one of them is back to Minot.
Mm-hmm.
It was, usually, you end up, hey, let me talk to my wife first and see what's available. We were both so sure is what we wanted that right away, I told personnel, yep, we'll take to Minot. And then I just called my wife afterwards and said, hey, we're going to go to Minot. And she was just, super happy.
That's incredible.
She did ask me, hey, what would the options have been? And she was like, yeah, we're going back to Minot.
Yeah.
So there was no question about it. Had the opportunity arose. And, of course, I retired in 2020 and it's 2024, and we're still here.
You're still here.
So.
Yeah. But what kept you here? What about North Dakota? You mentioned the values. What about Minot? Does the community play an effect in that?
It does. It is a wonderful community that I think truly cares about each other. You get true community here, and I think it comes back to values based on just conservative values. And got here in 2008, so I had an opportunity in 2011 with the flood.
Yeah.
At the time, I lived up on North Hill, right across the street from the airport. If anyone knows the blue house there on, was it 15th Street or 15th Avenue? That was our house. And so right across the street there, that's probably the thing that impacted me the most. Right across the street, north of there, between the airport and my house, it's a big open field where they put in the snow during the winter.
Yes.
Well, they fill that with sand, and people would go out making sandbags.
Wow.
And we were out there every day. The flood wasn't going to affect us because we were high on North Hill, but we were out there every day making sandbags. And it's not so much that we were out there, helping.
Yeah.
Just got to see that everyone was out there helping somebody.
Right.
The fact that when the flood occurred, 1/3 of all houses in Minot were destroyed, essentially.
It's incredible.
And yes, FEMA came in, helped, trailers, etc. But the amount of people that were just absorbed by the community, I got to see that. And even, the base helped. They opened up housing, everything, even just one big community.
Right.
And, the fact District 40 also covers them to the base, I just think it's a perfect combination of community across the board, from a little bit of the rural and ranchers and farmers in the district, which is a key part of North Dakota, to the city, to the base. It just encompasses that trifecta of what North Dakota really is. So seeing that in 2011, something hit me like, this is a community you want to live in. And then seeing us come out of it, right? Because I didn't move to the Pentagon in 2014, so we were pretty solidly out of it.
Right.
That to me, and to my wife as well, was like, this is a place to raise your kids. This is a place where they're going to get good, solid American values. So
Very
that's really
cool.
what did it for us.
Well, we're glad you stayed.
Thank you.
We're glad you're in North Dakota and hopefully for life. But let's talk campaign. What sparked you to run for this Senate seat in District 40?
When we first got here in North Dakota in 2008, and all these values I was talking about, like you could just, I mean, people would leave their car running at the mall.
Yeah.
And no big deal. It was cold winters. You know, you don't want your car to freeze up all the way to leaving your door unlocked. And I've seen a lot of that go away and disappear. Like people probably don't leave their car running open in the mall anymore. Right. So, and not just because there's an increase in crime, but start seeing that we're kind of divesting our way away from these values that made North Dakota and Minot and District 40 such a wonderful place to live. And I feel that one of the best places to be able to make a difference, instead of necessarily just complain about it, is to put yourself in a position where you can be not only part of the legislature writing bills, introducing bills, but more importantly, in the leadership role where you can sit down and talk to other legislators, running for Senate, so in this case it'd be, more on the Senate side, but talk to them and possibly convince them of, hey, there's a certain way of life that we all know and love in North Dakota. Let's not legislate ourselves out of it.
Right.
And because, sure, you get one vote, one in 94 votes in the House, one in 47 votes in the Senate. That's still only 1 in 47.
Right.
Not only do you, as a senator, do you have to be someone who is, moving forward legislation, but a part of it is you have to talk to your fellow legislators and have good, positive discussions, and through leadership, convince them that the way to go, depending on the bill, because we can sit here and talk ad nauseum about different bills that may have passed or not passed, but to me, a lot of it is the past is a little bit of, I'm a pilot, so, someone's looking pilot terms, it's runway behind me. Runway behind me is useless. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be a lot of issues that are still in the forefront that are going to be in the forefront, which hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about today. And that is what we need to do. And I can't do it by myself. No. There's no senator or congressman or if you will, representative that is going to be able to do it by themselves, or congressman in Washington, senator in Washington. Yeah. It has to be a concerted effort of somebody who truly believes in conservative American values, that is going to move legislation, propose legislation that moves in that direction, vote for legislation that moves us into a position to go. I mean, think move forward. I don't want to say we're going to go backwards, but gets us back to a conservative point of view. But no one can do it alone. You've got to bring people in.
Absolutely. Do you feel that currently there is a disconnect between the legislators that are in Bismarck, so that when they are in Bismarck, and the people?
I do think that there is a disconnect. I would say not a big disconnect, but a disconnect. I think part of it is just, I don't know, lack of a better term, structural. It's just capital is in Bismarck, like any other capital would be somewhere, right, and the remainder of the state is far out, and out of sight, out of your mind, out of mind, and you get into that, into the Senate, into the House, the governor for that matter, into the governorship, any sort of group that you get into politically, and you just start kind of moving along, almost drinking the Kool-Aid, because well, here's how we do things. And so I don't think that anybody goes out there in malice and starts to become disconnected from the constituents that they were voted to represent. But I think it's just a natural kind of flow of things that happens because we're human. Mm-hmm. And one of the other reasons that I also decided to run is because I feel like I had that experience in the Pentagon. So you're sitting at Base X, and you can talk to anybody who's been in any branch of the military, and you're always saying, we're getting all this policy handed down to us that we have to follow from the major commands, from the Pentagon. Yeah. And these guys have no idea what we're dealing with day to day, yet they send out these policies that make no sense, right? We call it the 5,000-mile screwdriver.
All right.
Right? In this case, it might be the 300 or 400 mile screwdriver coming from Bismarck. But when I had the opportunity to go to the Pentagon, I would say I'm going to make policy, because I had the opportunity to be in nuclear policy, being the nuclear bomber, and make policy for what I left to say. I'm not going to be the one who writes policy, gets it signed by the generals, gets it signed by the Secretary of, or not the Secretary of Defense, but in my case, Secretary of the Air Force, to turn around and be something not going to work. And I was there 2.5 years. About a year and a half into it, I felt myself grabbing that inertia of, well, this is just, we got to make policy. We got to keep doing this.
Gotcha.
We got to do the next thing. And I had to fight against that and be like, no, if I wrote this right now and then put myself back in Minot Air Force Base and then attempted to execute that policy, it would be an abject failure. So no, I'm going to fight for that. And so that right there is, I think it's an excellent question, because that's what I feel happens. No one's doing it out of malice. It just happens. And so something that, having experienced before, is fight very, very hard to ensure that the voices of District 40 are going to continuously be there and not just, roll forward and now have that disconnect.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about District 40 for a minute next. After that, we'll talk about the issues. But District 40 is going to turn into an interesting endorsing convention in March, I believe. It's March 12th, I believe. Andrew Schultz has announced his candidacy for the Senate spot. Of course, Karen Krebsbot has retired. That's been well stated. So it's an open seat. There's no incumbent. So Andrew Schultz has declared. Now you have declared. And Charles Tuttle has declared. Obviously, there's a little bit, and if you watch the podcast with Charles Tuttle, we covered some of it there. There's a little bit of not exactly sure how it's going to go down, whether or not Tuttle will be able to be endorsed at that endorsing convention, or if he'll only be able to run on the primary. But without there being this true incumbent, where it's not just one person running against
an incumbent,
it really makes it an interesting race. We got 3 people. It's all going to be their first time serving as a state senator. How do you see this playing out? It's obviously a pivotal time for you, but how do you see this playing out with the district coming together to support this senator, with the effect that we've been hearing? We need strong conservatism that comes out. How do you see this playing out?
I think we have, it is good for the political system in this country to have multiple candidates. You need to. We're a democracy, not anything else. It's not an autocracy. It's not a kingdom. It's not a dictatorship. So I think a testament to a true democracy is when multiple people can throw their hat in the ring, and then be able to discuss the issues, and then have people vote in the side who is that they want, whether it be at the at the party level, the primary level, or at the general election.
Right.
So I think that having more than one person run is healthy, and this is exactly what we need to have to ensure that the issues are brought to the forefront.
You're not ready to start a feud with one of the challengers? Teasing you.
Absolutely no feud, right? Like the feats of strength, like like on Seinfeld. If anyone is a fan, now this more than one candidate should bring good, positive discussion about the issues.
Absolutely. So speaking of the issues, what are your key issues that you are running on for your campaign? Give us your top 3. I'm sure there's a lot, but give us your top 3.
Individual liberty,
all right,
is number one. The rights that we have that are enumerated in the Bill of Rights aren't in the Bill of Rights because the government gave us those rights. They are in the Bill of Rights to let us know, to remind us that these are rights that preceded government.
All right.
So individual liberty means that, as our documents say, we were born with these liberties, just as the fact, endowed to us by our Creator.
Right.
These liberties are not to be messed with, for lack of better terms, by the government. So first and foremost, any law, or I should say law, any bill that is pushed forward that's trying to become law, one of the first things is going to be, does this encroach on individual liberty?
And can you define individual liberty?
Individual liberty means that you, and of course there are limits. You go through Supreme Court case after Supreme Court case where they've battled. Where does that line of individual liberty stop?
Right.
But I can generally say that individual liberty comes from. Let me back up and talk a little bit about where I think government's role is in the community, and that'll bring us right to individual liberty.
Right.
I think the government is there to provide a framework that provides, as we talk about, opportunity for people to grow, financially, grow emotionally, grow as human beings, do as they want to do, and that opportunity needs to be available if people do choose to take advantage of it.
Right.
And how is that going to happen? It's going to happen by building cities, infrastructure, right? With infrastructure, we're able to do more things. Like, I don't have to worry about planting food to get me through the winter because I can go to the grocery store, right? The cities are built. So that infrastructure, the government, through taxation, has the money to build this infrastructure. But then, now that you've said this is the opportunity, this is it, the question is, what is going to encroach on my liberty to do that? Well, sometimes it's other human beings, because at the end of the day, it's still human beings that are in government. But it could be you coming into my house and stealing my stuff. Well, we can't do that because you're encroaching on my liberty. Therefore, we have laws in place that say you, Jonathan, can't come into Jose's house and steal my stuff, right? You can't beat me up. You can't kill me, right? Things that take away my liberty. So, of course, there have to be rules in place in an orderly society through government that gets put in place. So, sure, are you being, quote, encroached on your liberty because now you can't come to my house to steal my stuff? Yes, but your liberty to do that takes away from my liberty.
Yeah.
So that line being drawn, the question is the government going to pass a law, or in the process of passing a law, that is going to tell me that I can't do a certain thing? And for what reason? In my opinion, there needs to be a huge benefit, a huge extreme benefit to the community,
right,
that far exceeds the loss of liberty that I'm going to have. An example could be at airports. No one wants to go through the 100 million miles of security.
Right.
But I think to a certain extent, although there could be some people who would disagree, that small loss of liberty comes to a huge win for the community, because we attempt to prevent aircraft hijackings, right?
Right.
So it really is a balance. That's the balance of how much individual liberty is taken and what are we gaining from it, and the returns better be enormous.
So here's one that has been talked about in North Dakota every once in a while, and that's seatbelts. That's an individual liberty, but it's put in place to protect yourself from yourself. Is that something where individual liberty is being encroached on, or is that a good law to have in place that you're required to wear a seatbelt?
I think that seatbelts will just, Y18 is the age that we've set as adults. I don't know. I think it should be higher if you look at how our brain truly works and develops.
You're right on that.
That being said, 18. So you're a child, especially to protect children, to make sure that, they're in chairs and et cetera, you got to wear a seatbelt, because we've made an assumption in society that magically, before you're 18 years old, you don't know better for yourself. The second you turn 18, you do.
Good to go.
It is what it is. We do have to draw a line, so that's that.
That's fair.
I think the question comes in, though, is in the cost to society. If you don't wear a seatbelt, you're most likely to fly out the window.
Right.
Which you're going to hurt yourself more.
Yep.
And here's where I think the cost of society comes in. Yes, that person may or may not have medical insurance, but it is going to be a much higher cost to society because of the loss of life, the extra money it's going to cost to, because now you're going to the ICU versus, I don't know, maybe not because the seatbelt was able to save you. So I think it is that's a tough one because I personally do see that there is more gain than not because I've got to put my seatbelt on. Or another example, put on a helmet if I'm driving a motorcycle.
Great example.
I do not see that you are truly curtailing someone's ability. It's not like I'm telling you, you can't go drive your car out in a wonderful mountain drive.
Yeah.
You just got to put on your seatbelt.
Right.
So the curtailing of liberty is minor compared to the societal gain that we don't have death after death after death.
Yep, absolutely. Very good. That's issue number one, individual liberty. What's another top issue?
Government reduction.
Okay.
Government reduction and that's the size of the government and taxation.
Right.
Kind of come together. As government grows, you need, why does government grow? Government grows because we decide government needs to do more things. Things that I don't think government need to be doing.
Right.
And so because government needs to do more things, then we need to open up more departments because who's going to track those things, which means you need to hire people, which means that you need to pay them. And so that money needs to come from somewhere. So size of government is, to me, directly correlated with how much taxation we have. So I think that government, as it stands now, could be smaller.
Okay.
People have voted in certain offices of the government at the state level, and I would love to see them get smaller. But at the very least, I think the first thing we need to do is stop growing government. At best, if you look at budgets, and we could go back and say, well, if we're going to leave the budget the way it is, why should the budget have to increase any more than it did by inflation? Right? Our salaries don't always increase, as much as inflation.
Right.
Prices initially go up. Salaries at some point do catch up to that. It takes a little bit of time, but after we've had a huge inflation, you give it 3-5 years. If there's no more, it'll catch up. But if we're going to say, okay, things need to grow by the size of inflation, that's fine. Because if the government needs to buy bottles of water for their workers, and it was 80 cents yesterday, and then today it's 82 cents,
it's going to cost more.
Okay, it's going to cost more than you to buy bottles of
water.
water.
So a 3% increase in budget annually.
Got it. Maybe this time it goes up 6 or 8 because inflation did go up that much. That's a different story. That's more at the federal level, something that, we're not controlling here. But beyond that, and so what I'd like to look at is you go back to at least 3 budgets ago, and these increases have been astronomical and above and beyond just the cost of living.
Right.
So if your individual's salaries aren't going up, why does the government get to increase?
Yeah.
Short of some, and if it's going to increase massively by like $1 billion, what program are we putting in place that all of a sudden the government needs $1 billion? Right? I go back to, government should have infrastructure. One of the few things I can think of is if all of a sudden, and that means government messed up from the get-go, you look back and you say, all our roads and bridges are on a complete state of disrepair. We've been ignoring their repair for the last 30 years. So I'm not saying that's the case here.
Right.
But now
example.
We need to get on it. And so it's going to cost an extra $1 billion a year for the next 20 years because we haven't been investing in that. Okay, that is something government needs to be doing. There's been examples where, private roads are made by private entrepreneurs. And the costs are extravagant. Making roads, you make roads, and the cost of doing them, maintain them is at a loss. What business is going to go into business to be at a loss?
Yeah.
So there are certain things government just needs to do. It's going to be at a loss. We all, pitch in, and we have nice roads, we have bridges, you name it. But short of those kinds of things that you look back and you say, hey, we've failed for the past 20 years, so we're going to fix it. I see absolutely no reason why we need to increase budgets, just to add another program, just to add another way that government is going to grow, get bigger. And in my opinion, bigger government just means more interference in our lives because that means that government not only is going to make laws, but now you got the second hand effect, both in the federal and the state level, where these administrations have the executive ability to now run certain ways and then decide, how they want to run their the executive branch wants to run.
Yeah.
And it's okay, because to a certain extent, laws are made having a little bit of leeway, not exactness, because these administrations, these executive branch departments need to be able to run.
Right. So with government reduction, it brings into an interesting question of which services get cut, which would be probably a podcast in itself. So I think the more a specific question that can be more quickly answered is, where does the role of government end?
I think that the role of government is simply to protect you from me, like we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Provide that protection through laws that say you can't hurt me, a police force to ensure that you're not hurting me, and if you do, then you go to jail.
So
it does cost us to have jails, etc., you name it. So that's civil side. We talked about building infrastructure.
Right.
As we get into education, some argue, is it the government's job to educate or not? That being said, I would say that it has proven, regardless of how you might agree or disagree, that the role of government, exactly what curriculums are using to educate, which we can get into that. Having an educated society where everyone has to go to school compulsory and make it to a certain grade and learn certain things, so that when the goal is you walk out as a 12th grader, you've graduated high school, you can now effectively join the workforce.
Right.
Right. You might go on to get a trade. You might go on to, get a degree through college. 100 ways, you're going to make a living, but you've now been given the basics to enter society effectively. Many would argue that your 12th grader may not quite be there. So you could say, okay, that's the role of government. Yes, we need taxes to pay for that, etc. But beyond those roles, I have a difficult time, in my opinion, entertaining any larger role of government. Limited government is that we should just be extremely cautious every time government wants to grow.
Right.
Right. I know it was brought up previously, but I'm a big fan of Reagan, and every time the government says, "Hey, I'm here to help,"
right,
your hair on the back of your neck should really come up.
Right.
So, like I said, anytime a law is going to be brought up to grow government, the returns need to be huge for society.
Right. So they have some programs now, and I potentially on that same podcast we may have talked about this. I can't remember exactly, but of like Free Through Recovery, I believe that's a government program, and what it does is it provides funding, but then private nonprofits and stuff like that are actually able to complete the work. Is that a place where it is able to be, the government is able to help effectively, or are you coming from the point of view that the money shouldn't even be spent there?
I think that those kinds of that kind of incentive, if you will, because then that's government to a certain sense incentivizing a nonprofit to maybe move forward, because nonprofits, some of them have a lot of money,
they don't,
not a lot
fundraising,
and
is
sometimes
difficult.
if maybe you gave them a little incentive, then you could get a nonprofit running and making a positive effect in society. Right. But usually I would say that those programs that we're talking about tend to have the most effectiveness at the local level. When I say local, I mean municipal, city level.
So you're saying funding should even come from the city level?
Funding should come from the city level, and it should be a group of people at the city who get to vote and choose on that.
Very
because you step back and you say, okay, we go back to the 300, 400-mile screwdriver, where you're going to tell me that 94 representatives and 47 senators in Bismarck know best what community action program needs to occur in Can-Do, North Dakota. Like, are you kidding me right now?
Right.
That is where, if Can-Do, North Dakota wants to do a certain thing and municipally they don't have the funds for that, then there are ways they can maybe look at the county level. And if not, then look at the state level. But now that would be a municipality reaching out saying, hey, Bismarck, can you help me?
Right.
Not Bismarck saying, hey, I think you need help there. I'm going to help you with something you may or may not want. Yeah. And now the citizens, or if you will, the residents of, Watford City are paying for something that Can-Do needs. And I don't think there's a lack of, that doesn't seem right to me. So the Makes more sense. You keep it at the local level, and anytime you can avoid that 300-mile screwdriver, you're going to be better off.
Gonna need to get a T-shirt with that. Third point, last one. What's your third issue?
So we talked about limited government.
Yep. Individual liberty.
Individual responsibility.
Yep.
And education.
Education. That's a big topic.
That is a big topic, and it is the first two align very much with the Republican. If you look up the Republican platform, they're from there.
All right.
Why? Because I'm a Republican. I believe as a Republican.
Yeah.
If everyone that ran as a Republican followed that platform, I think we'd be in a completely different position.
Yeah.
So there's a reason why my platform aligns with the Republican platform. But expanding from there, education needs to happen more at the local level.
Okay.
There should not be, once again, Bismarck should not be dictating to Watford City how they're going to educate. Mm-hmm. We need to allow local politics to the max extent possible, local jurisdictions to decide. And at the end of the day, the people that are truly in charge of the education of the children are the parents.
Right.
And parents need to be afforded the opportunity to choose what they want or not want to do. I know it becomes a difficult thing, and I don't necessarily say that I can come here with 100% of the answers. But if there's a curriculum that is going on that is not allowing, that a parent says, I do not want my kids learning that, and I assure you 9 times out of 10, probably 909 times out of 1,000, it's not like, I don't want them learning math, or I don't want them to learn American history, I don't want them to learn world history. It's something above and beyond the basics. Parents should be able to just opt out of that and move on, because they get to choose. And just because they're sending their kids to a public school, which, by the way, they're paying for via their taxes. It's not they're paying tuition, but they are paying for it. That doesn't mean that now all of a sudden, I guess I have no choice. I'm taking my kid to a public school. Therefore, whatever their curriculum is what it is. I have no say, and I'm just going to have to deal with it. To me, that is unacceptable. Parents should choose exactly what their kids learn, and that needs to be something that can be opt-out to.
So basically, there's to come back against that a little bit, there probably should be requirements for math, for English, for history,
yes,
for some of the core things.
Right, reading, writing, and arithmetic, as they would say.
But what has happened is that core has expanded to now there's requirements in humanitarians and social studies and stuff like that, which is important, but it has, with the rise in a great amount of diversity in the world that we live in, has created some interesting requirements for kids now. And that's something basically, would you be saying that you're not a fan of that, basically?
I'm not a fan of it. And if parents are a fan of it, then they should go to the school boards and say, I want this. But more than not, what do we see? Parents at school board meetings say, stop teaching my kids this, that, and the other. There are books in the library that I don't think are age appropriate for kids.
Yeah.
And so it just blows my mind that when a parent does not want their children learning something that is not, if you will, the reading, writing, or arithmetic, history, etc., there's any sort of even pushback.
Right. Not enough.
It comes down to the education of your own kids. Someone, tells me, well, here, you need to bring up your kid to espouse, say, the values that Ronald Reagan had.
Yeah.
Like, really? I'm not going to go tell another parent to do that. Another parent, is not going to tell me to do that.
Right.
But all of a sudden, because it's a public education institution, that seems to make it okay.
Right.
Definitely not a fan. And so with that, we definitely need to come back to ensuring that the basic things that we are learning, that kids are learning, allow them to walk out of 12th grade being effective members of society. And unfortunately, our test scores in North Dakota show that we're not, I think, quite reaching that goal. So once we start reaching that goal, we can expand. But I think we should concentrate on reading, writing, and arithmetic, and then we'll move on from there.
So right now, there's no incentive for a parent to homeschool their kid. There's no incentive for, I don't believe that there's an incentive for a parent to put their kid in a private school either.
Not.
And is that something that needs to change? Because I still get to pay my property tax bill and make sure that my kid,
school's available,
which is a whole nother discussion of why that's done through property taxes.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
because that's also not fair.
No, it should be done through other taxes. I believe we can get a discussion about property taxes, but
that's not today's topic. But specifically, is that something that you would fight for? Some type of legislation that would help parents that are putting their kids through private schools or that are homeschooling their own kids with some type of credit or something like that?
I think so, and I think it should be a credit, not a handout, for lack of better terms. Because what are you're gonna tax Jimmy over here to give Joan the credit so that she can go either afford the curriculum for homeschooling,
right,
or go to private school X. We're not trying to reappropriate wealth, right? It's the standard modern Robin Hood, right? Still from the rich to give to the poor, if you will. That's not what we should be doing. But if your chunk of taxes that are going towards educating your kid, you need that somewhere else, then maybe you get an opportunity to pay less of it or none of it, because you're going to turn around and use that for education. Which, I'll be the first here that, for anyone who'll be watching this, I am not going to sit here and say that these issues are easy and that I've got all the answers, because I do fully understand that then, it's a slippery slope. Okay, now, for example, my kids, I have 8 kids. They range anywhere from 24 years old to a freshman in high school. That means that here in 4 years, they'll be done and off to college. I've made it, right? Okay, well, I don't want to pay any more property taxes, not because, we're getting into the property tax issue. But I don't have kids going to school.
Right, you don't want to pay that portion.
Exactly. Why should I be paying it if over there this person gets not paid because, so I do fully understand. I bring this up because I'm going to sit here and not act like I'm the all-knowing, vote for me, be senator. I completely understand that these issues are multifaceted and not easy, but that is why you need to go to Bismarck and have a lot of other people and have solid discussion and leadership. And at the end of the day, yes, we need to have certain issues that we believe in and want to move forward. But going back to the tenets that I am running on, individual liberty, less government, individual responsibility, education, what it comes down to is that everything you see has to be looked at the lens of how is my tax money, which to a certain extent we talk about liberty, me having to give forcefully my money away takes away some of my liberty.
Yep.
How is that going to benefit the community more than, get in the way of things? So although I do think that a family that wants to send their kids to private school or homeschool we should definitely find a way that they can have a reduction in taxes to be able to afford that, or at least be a help.
Right.
But it cannot then be at the cost of the greater society, where if everyone was doing that, how are we going to fund public schools? And there's got to be a balance. And that is why I think I would do great things in the Senate, because those are the discussions that need to be had. And I think everything needs to go back and be weighed against the extra taxation, which is removing liberty, to what are we going to gain as a society, and how is this going to make us a better society? We have to give up a little bit of liberty to have an orderly society.
Right.
And that is a constant balance back and forth. But as we see taxes grow and grow and grow and grow, when's the last time taxes just went down?
Yeah.
When's the last time that laws were taken off the
questions.
books to say, oh, I'm going to give you your liberty back?
Right.
Every session, 1,000 bills get passed with just more and more and more and more and more. We need to, like I said, we might not be able to necessarily cut back 200 programs over the next session, but at the very least, if I'm elected, I'm going to work on not growing it anymore. We cannot grow faster than the rate of inflation. At the very least, stop where we are. Just why do we need to grow?
Right. So in North Dakota, there's been a lot of change in politics over the past year. We can go through it all. We've gone through it before. If you're listening to this podcast, you've heard me ask this question before, but I think it's an interesting perspective for each candidate to discuss. What is your thoughts on the stability of politics in North Dakota? But because you are a Republican, specifically the Republican Party, with the massive amount of change that they're going through right now.
Well, I am very much for term limits. We just recently, last session, passed term limits for the state.
And now age limits is trying to get on the ballot this time around.
They are. Well, a whole other discussion, that we can have later for sure. But because I am pro term limits, and I hope we see term limits in the federal government one day too. We clearly already see them with the president, but obviously it'd be Congress. That is by nature going to bring more turnover in positions.
Yeah.
And so that in of itself does not bring an instability. I mean, let's go back to our founding fathers. If anyone knows history, George Washington could have continued to reelect himself every 4 years and continue to be president until the day he died.
Right.
Undoubtedly. But did he, after 2 terms, did he say, you know what? I'm going to not run again, and this is going to cause an instability in the government? No. Just because there's turnover does not mean instability. And so I think that if there's anybody who might be against term limits, is because they might say, oh, well, we need to have a certain stability, a certain group of people there that know what's going on. We do not. That does not bring instability. In fact, turnover is a good thing. Better ideas, more ideas, fresh ideas coming in, not somebody that's been entrenched in their Kool-Aid and groupthink. And I got to see it firsthand at the Pentagon. If there was more turnover in the Pentagon, I think there's a possibility that we might have better policies that you see carried out in the field.
Yeah.
When you haven't been out in the field for who knows how long,
right, you lose touch.
You lose touch. And so if anything, the turnover that we are seeing is a very good thing, and it's allowing people that are in touch go into office, make good positive changes, and then before they lose touch, we have the next set. So you continuously have people in government that are in touch and not going back to the way we started our discussion here, have that natural disconnect that happens between any capital and their constituents that is not by malice, it's by design.
But in District 40, you have a unique thing, potentially, and I'm just, from a numbers perspective, you only have one incumbent, Matt Ruby, and for a House seat. So you're going to have somebody new guaranteed, somebody new in the Senate, and you're going to have somebody new in the House guaranteed. But there is, besides Matt, there's, I believe, 3 other candidates looking for a House seat to fill one spot. But the way that it will work is there's a chance that even Matt gets replaced. So Why do I bring this up? Bring this up because you could have a whole new slate of representatives in District 40. And that is not a smooth transition.
It is not, but I think that we are, once again, we go back to being a democracy, and we get to choose who we want.
I think that's good.
So if District 40 chooses, like you said, 2 of the 3 positions are going to be new, undoubtedly, somebody, right? Let's just say all 3 are.
Yep.
That means that as long as it was a legitimate vote by legitimate citizens that are voters, right?
Yep.
Then that is what the people wanted. And
right.
I think we often say, well, are we saying that, your average resident citizen is not smart enough to realize that if they don't vote for the incumbent, they are going to now create instability? Maybe they don't want the incumbent anymore, right? So if they don't want the incumbent, they shouldn't have the incumbent because that's what they vote for. And I think, sure, is there going to be a slight bit of instability because there's a learning curve for new legislators in Congress to learn? Sure. But I think that is a very small price to pay to ensure that a democracy continues and we elect who we want. If they want the incumbent, then vote for the incumbent.
Right.
So I think the fact that we might even say, okay, well, we act like instability. I'm not going to say there won't be instability, but it is such a small price to pay to ensure that a democratic tradition continues.
Yeah. So last question on this, because an interesting part of this is now spurred on because of term limits. So if there's a whole new slate in a district, the chances are that there will be incumbents voted in next time, unless if those 3 fresh faces just do a terrible job. Most likely they'll get voted in again. If you go and you look at numbers based off of incumbents and the percentage of times that they get re-voted in.
Yeah, huge likelihood that the incumbent makes it in.
Okay, so new slate, they go in, they get re-voted in. Now they've hit their term limit, and now you're in a cycle where there's every 8 years, there's always a new slate of people going in, which is still very interesting.
I think it is very interesting, and I think that when we talk about term limits at the federal level, that is also something that could happen. You continue to have these fresh faces continuously, and
does that concern you?
It doesn't. It concerns me minimally because I personally believe that we gain much more from that than not. Now, you're going to see an example would be you're going to see a lot more special interest issues at the federal level than necessarily at the state level. But as much as people are not a fan of special interests, bankrolling the pockets of our U.S. senators and congressmen, think how much all those special interests that, you might be a fan of some special interests, but not others. Everyone is where they're at.
Right.
Every special interest, at every time someone would hit their term limit, has to start over convincing someone else. So that means that they're not just bankrolled and now that person's in my pocket.
Yeah.
That means that natural turmoil that is created, that I'm not denying it won't happen, is good for democracy because it keeps us alive. It keeps us fresh. It ensures that people continue to be in touch with their constituents instead of going to their capital, in our case Bismarck, and kind of losing touch. So, yes, there creates a little bit of turmoil.
Right.
But I think it way more positive than negative.
District 40 is set up in a good spot because they do have one incumbent. So, I mean, 2, if the incumbent, which percentages say most likely he will, gets reelected, there'll be 2 fresh new faces. Incumbent will hit his term limit, and then there'll be 1 new fresh face, and it's going to be
offset.
Right. They're going to be offset.
2 representatives would be offset.
Going to be a great an opportunity for a great transition sequence for a few years. But I think it's also interesting. We had an interview with Dr. Rick Becker concerning his run for the U.S. Congress and that House of Representatives seat that's being vacated by Kelly Armstrong. And we asked him, if you get elected, we talk about the president's first 100 days in office, what are the first things you're going to do when you get elected? And he was like, I'm going to go learn procedure. And that's what's overlooked sometimes by voters, I think, is you elect this person and you expect them to go gung-ho into that position you elected them for, but they're not president. They don't have the opportunity to go and sign an executive order. They don't have this just blank check opportunity to just go crazy on these issues. They have to go learn the processes, learn the procedures, learn how the order of power is, learn the nuances of that, of where they're able to fight for the issues that you voted them in for. It's not that they're following in line with everybody else and becoming part of the process that is government, is that they're understanding it so they know how to get work done. That's a lot of words for the guy asking questions to say, but I think it's a really interesting perspective.
I think so.
When someone's getting elected.
I agree with you. I mean, going back to my experience I had at the Pentagon, it's not the people that go there get elected, but it is a very small group of people compared to the whole military that are making policy on behalf of everyone else. So you're not elected, but the similarities are extremely high. And the first 6 months in the Pentagon, I was kind of lost.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie to you. But it took me that much time to understand. The people that mentored me would say, go walk the hallways of the Pentagon. Yeah. Go find out where people's offices are. Go meet people. Go understand how policy is made. And so I had a great boss that gave me that leeway.
Right.
And so after about 6 months of really understanding it, I thought I could start, having effectiveness. So, yeah, totally agree with him. And that is something that needs to be. You need to understand the process before you jump in and say, hey, look at all these changes I'm going to make.
Stuff. For sure. Yeah. Well, I have taken too much time today, so I apologize about that. But before we sign off, how can people support you?
Go to my website, Jose for District 40, and there you'll see links to be able to support me, see what I believe in, and you'll have links to all my other social media. And of course, if you see me walking around, please stop me, ask questions, because that is truly how our system works. Ask me, I will talk to you about anything, truly what I believe, straight from the heart, and that's how you can find me.
So visit josefordistrict40.com. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This has been another edition of the Dakotans Election Central, where we are covering the entire 2024 North Dakota election process. You can go to mydakotan.com, click Election Central. There you're going to see a bunch of the candidates. You're going to see interviews like the one you just watched, news articles on the candidates, and much more. So be sure to do that. Also, stop by Facebook, give it a like, follow us there. Stop by YouTube, subscribe, become part of the Dakotan community. We'd love to have you. We hope you enjoyed this video. We hope you stay tuned for some more. Thanks, and have a great day.